Hey, this is Nelfi coming to you with a Arcane Mage 7.1.5 guide, and I want to jump right into it and start on talents. Here's the new talents. We had a couple changes since 7.1. The first being Amplification, which makes Arcane Missiles deal more damage for Arcane charges. Slipstream was put in that we can use Arcane Missiles and Evocation while moving, but we have to not take Shimmer to be able to have that. With the removal of Icy Flows, these are our movement abilities. Then everything here seemed to stay the same until we get down here where Icy Flows used to be, and we get Chrono Shift, which essentially lets us move faster after we barrage. Then we come down to the same tier. Nether Tempest has been nerfed a little bit, and then our Overpowered was completely changed to increase our damage by 70%, which will be 60% in a day or two, and reduce the mana cost by 60%. And then Flux is what replaced Quickening, and it reduces Arcane Blast cast time by 5% for each Arcane charge. And then Arcane Orb got a significant buff where it actually does damage, which is nice. In terms of rating, how you're going to want a talent setup is usually going to be something like this. This is what everyone seems to be going with, either this or Resonance. And to talk about charged up in Resonance, Resonance actually sims higher for single target DPS, which seems strange, but so a lot of people run with that. A lot of kill users run with charged up. Since a lot of the encounters in Nighthold are AoE, Resonance probably performs better depending on how often you're barraging. I personally run charged up even without the kill because I like the freedom of being able to use it as a movement speed increase and then instantly bring my charges back up, as well as my opening burst. I use that on pull. I precast Mark of Alunith and then charged up. So either one I don't think is going to make or break the bank or your sims. Not your sims, your rankings or anything. So you can choose either one of these. I'll run with Resonance. And Erosion is doing the best if you're not target swapping a ton. You're attacking this for 10 seconds and then you swap over to here and you get this and then you're AoEing these for 5 seconds and then after that you switch back to the boss. If you're not doing something like that, Erosion's probably going to be your best bet. Unstable Magic got buffed in its percentage chance to proc, but still doesn't outperform Erosion, specifically because we're doing a lot of Arcane Missiles with our 2 and 4 set bonuses. And then Nether Tempest's damage got nerfed, as well as with the removal of Quickening, we have less haste, which was why it was dealing so much damage. So Erosion's usually the go-to, and Overpowered is just beating all the others. I think Temporal Flux has a possibility with the right Legendaries, gears, or right stat weights and everything to possibly compete on single target fights only, but there's not that many single target fights in Nighthold, and Overpowered with any AoE just seems to completely outdo it. So those are your talent setups, and another thing I wanted to go over in terms of talent choices is Slipstream and Shimmer, and a lot of people just baseline go Slipstream because they don't want their evocation to be interrupted. With this, some fights are really going to favor Shimmer, and one of the big downsides that is changed with not always having Shimmer is that not only can you not cast and then blink, you'll either have to use a stop cast macro to blink in the middle of your cast, or be casting, then move, then Shimmer, or then blink, sorry. But on top of that, you can't blink and instantly displace back, because I don't think that can be I put it on cooldown. But so there's that as a disadvantage. So you can't blink on the global, blink while casting. And so that's a big disadvantage as well. You sometimes find yourself without a blink, and I'm not used to it. I'm used to having 2 blinks. So I've died a couple times from thinking that I had a blink, so you really need to pay attention to your usage of it as well. But having arcane missiles as often as we do really does make Slipstream a powerful choice. So it depends on where the movement is. If it's a lot of movement really quickly, and then you don't have to move for a while, Shimmer might benefit you. Whereas Slipstream, you don't always sit on 3 arcane missiles to be able to constantly move during a high movement period, but you're able to move more often, more frequently. So that was all for talents. And now I want to go into stat weights, which is probably something I hate the most as an arcane, and just how it is in general. So before I give you stat weights, I want to start by saying don't blindly use stat weights. I'm going to give you stat weights, and you may think they're the greatest thing on earth, but I really don't blindly follow stat weights. There's a real big difference depending on which legendaries you have, and the mastery number or percentage isn't a set thing. You can have more or less mastery, and on certain fights, having more mastery will be better and some will be worse. So there's no one set thing, and I don't want you to think that. So what I wanted to do is quickly reference Frosted in the Altered Time forums. He has stat weights that he's put out, and I wanted to read those to you. The single target one is crit verse mastery haste. And so haste is the lowest, crit's the highest, and versatility is above mastery. When you move to AoE, your stat weights are essentially the same, except for haste is put on top. So then it'll go haste, crit, versatility, mastery. And so the stat weights that I tend to give out are crit and haste, then versatility, then mastery. And versatility and mastery can change positions depending on what legendaries you have. And the reason I put haste so high is because I feel haste is not a very well simmed stat in general and not very well accounted for. And if you're doing AoE, which you do a ton of in Nighthold as well as Mythic Plus, haste is going to be a more desirable stat. And so that's why I put it second place. So, and mastery is the lowest because I feel it's one of the worst scaling stats. So people generally ask, oh, like what ratio do you want? And I typically say something around 30% crit, 20% haste, 25 or 35% mastery, depending on which legendaries you have. I run around like 25 since I run with Ronin's Assaulting Arm Wraps, where you might want to run closer to 30 or higher without a mana-saving legendary, such as Gravity Spiral, the Kilt, or Ronin's Bracers. And versatility, I have it like 4 or 5%. And if you shoot for something around that, you can see my stats don't perfectly fit that. I have less crit than 30. I have almost 5% more haste, and I haven't changed this enchant to go haste yet. So I'm at about 5% over on haste, 3 under on mastery, and my versatility's right there. But every piece of gear you equip is going to completely change your stats by quite a bit. So you just need to be generally around there. Like if I get a really high rolling shock baton and I place that here instead, my crit goes up. And then if instead of my Nod Thumb Ring, I decide I want to run with my Cephas's Secret instead. So I'll pull this off, put my other shoes there, and put this here instead of my Nod Thumb Ring. My mastery now drops to 20%, 35% crit, and I've got more haste even, and less versatility. Doing that isn't going to break the bank, or it's not going to kill you. It's okay to be a little bit off the recommended stat weights that I gave. And please don't blame your DPS on your stat weights, because that is absolutely not the problem. So that's as far as I really wanted to go with stat weights. On to what people call the best in slot. For Arcane, we really don't have a set best in slot. The only things I can say is if you get really high Titan Forged Nod Thumb Rings and the 2-set from Arcway and Court of Stars, if you can get those very high, you can wear all of those without taking up any legendary spots with with the exception of the helm here. You can fit another ring in if you have the Nod Thumb ring, and you can fit your 4 set around these 4 pieces. Granted, it's not always necessarily your best piece or the best stats, but you can fit that in. But these also have to tighten forwards pretty high. I wear 880 and 855, and this one's kind of low, and I'm looking for a better one. But if I get a 2 set or a 4 set and I need this spot to complete it, this is the first thing that goes in terms of our best in slot. But that's what you should aim for. As well, if you have the unstable Arcana Crystal, this is still sitting at like number 3, I think, on the trinket lists. Granted, they're not completely perfectly up to date, but even an 861 is sitting up there really high. So those are some things I'd aim for. Outside of that, there is no set best in slot. Like, which 4 pieces do you want to have? There's nothing particularly set in stone, and even legendaries change on certain bosses. Granted, the Kilt and Kil'jaeden's Burning Wish are the top legendaries for rating, as far as if you had to pick just 2. Next up is trinkets, and the trinket list is being compiled by Binkenstein, which I'm really grateful for, and I'm going to put a link to it either somewhere on my UI or down below in the description, where you can pull up what he's kept updated and look at that for trinkets, as far as I know. But I think the top 3 are still Kil'jaeden's Burning Wish, the trinket from Gul'dan, Whispers in the Dark, and then number 3 is the 860 Arcana Crystal. So that's where they're sitting as far as I'm aware. And you'll have the rest of the list to compare item levels of different trinkets versus different item levels of different trinkets in the description below. Next is the artifact path. I go over this in the guide, but at this point in the expansion, you can almost get this as fast as you want to. But typically, if you're going for single target, you go this way to rule of 3s first, and depending on whether you run Mythic Plus or care about or not, it's recommended to go this way to get Arcane Rebound. And then from there, you can either go Arcane Barrage damage over here, or you can take a little longer route and go Arcane Missiles, which is more single target focused, and then come over this way. After that, you're going to want to complete everything outside of these 3, I'm sorry. And then from here, there's the Arcane Explosion Radius, which is really nice for Mythic Plus, and then Agewin's Ascendance, and then Slowdown. And then you start putting your essentially Paragon points for here. So that's how the artifact progression goes. Next, I want to go to our opener, and this changes if you have charged up, so I'll show you without charged up. You're going to want to pre-pot and then pre-cast Arcane Blast, get it up to 4 charges, and look at the Arcane Missile generation here. You're going to want to go here, and then you're going to Mark of Lunith, Rune of Power, and then Arcane Power, and then use any Arcane Missiles for the first maybe 3 or 4 seconds. Oh, I messed it up already. And a lot of people will save their... Oh, well, I messed that up. That's embarrassing, huh? What you want to do is you want to build a 4, and then Mark of Lunith, Rune of Power, Arcane Power, and then immediately after that, if you don't have Arcane Missiles, like I did have them, so you'll want to dump those first, and then you'll want to make sure you're not going to overwrite more Arcane Missiles, but then you want to Presence of Mind and launch off 2 Arcane Blasts immediately to hope for a Touch of the Magi proc. And then what you want to do is you want to focus your casts to be, for the second half of Arcane Power, you want them to all be Arcane Blasts and end with about 3 Arcane Missile procs. 2 at least, if not 3. And you can use your Arcane Missiles at the beginning of Arcane Power because you can possibly proc more later. But the reason that I save my Arcane Missiles near the end of Arcane Power is because you're going to want to drop your second Rune of Power and then dump your Arcane Missiles. And not to mention, if you have Ronin's Arm Wraps, having those afterwards to possibly proc more free Arcane Blasts would be better outside of Rune of Power than it would, or Arcane Power, than it would inside Arcane Power. So let me try that again. I'll do that correctly this time once I drop these charges. We will do our pre-pot, then you're going to Arcane Blast. See, I probably won't get as lucky as I did last time with those Arcane Missiles. Then you'll Mark of Luneth, Rune of Power, Arcane Power, and then Presence of Mind, 2 Arcane Blasts, and then use maybe an Arcane Missile. And then I usually sit at about at 6 to 9 seconds. I really don't want to drain any more of those, because sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. And then you'll pop your second Rune of Power, use both Arcane Missiles, or Arcane Missile, then Arcane Blast if you get your proc for Ronins. And then once you get to this point, then you just want to burn your mana all the way down. And here I'll kind of go into the Conserve phase. So right after you evocate, another thing you don't want to do is use an Arcane Missile. You want to Arcane Blast immediately, and then you can use your Arcane Missiles, okay? Because you don't want to sit on full mana. And as I'm going to go to full mana here, I will also use another one, and I'm going to Arcane Barrage, okay? Then you'll build up. The Conserve rotation is essentially, you just want to build up to 4 charges, and then spend all your Arcane Missiles, and then Barrage and do it again. And depending on how lucky you're getting and or how your mana is looking, you can determine when you want to do another mini burn. So I'm going to do a mini burn here because I'm sitting kind of high on Arcane, or my mana percentage. So I have like 3 seconds left on Rune of Power, so I Barrage. And my mana is sitting at about half with Evocation coming off soon and Arcane Power coming off now. In which case, I'm going to do my burn again, Mark of Luneth, Rune of Power, Arcane Power, Presence of Mind, and 2 Arcane Blasts. Maybe dump 1 Arcane Missile, and then from there I'm just going to Arcane Blast and get to 3 charges, hopefully. We'll see if I make it or not. Nope. And then I'm going to use my Arcane Missiles here, and hopefully I'll have enough mana to let my Evocation run all the way out. And I'll get my last cast here. And then sometimes you can Barrage, and then Evocation right after that. And then you're going to want to cast an Arcane Blast immediately. So that's kind of how the Conserve rotation is going to change a little bit depending on whether or not you have a mana legendary that's helping you. But that's the basic Conserve. If I just do a 4 charge like this, Arcane Barrage rotation, and don't use any Arcane Missiles or don't get any, I'm really going to be struggling for mana by the end of this, you can see. But I'll not use any Ronin procs if I get them, and you'll see how I still kind of struggle for mana a little bit. So your Evocation cooldown is going to be coming off. I'm almost going to be beating my Evocation cooldown, but Arcane Power is what relieves that with such low mastery. So we'll once again go here, use a second Arcane Missiles, and then on this charge up, I'll have Arcane Power, and that's what will get me to last through. Oh man, look at that luck. Mark of Luneth, Rune of Power, Arcane Power, and then I'm going to use these 2, and then I'm going to use my Presence of Mind there, and you'll see my mana is going to barely make it at this point. People ask for a percentage number where you don't want to start your Arcane Power. Usually what that is probably around like 25%. And look at that. That almost lasts perfect for me. So that's kind of the Conserve rotation and burn and how you would rotate through, do a consistent rotation there. As far as that goes, that is with that talent setup. Your rotation will be, the general rotation will be the same if you were to use Temporal Flux, but I want to wait till after the changes come into effect tomorrow to do any more work with Temporal Flux and see how that works, especially with Ronins in a 2 or 4 set. I'm not running the 2 or 4 set from Nighthold currently, but that will definitely ease up your rotation as well with how many Arcane Missiles you'll have, and that'll extend the amount of time during Arcane Power for which you cast So I said usually from about 6 to 9. I depending on how many I have. If I have 2 in there, maybe I'll burn 1 at 9. But then after 6 seconds, I typically don't spend any arcane missiles. You might be able to push that back a couple seconds with the 4 set due to having a higher arcane missile proc chance from your 2 and 4 set. And as I said, also that'll ease up your conserve rotation, generating a lot more arcane missiles. And so if I'm going to do a separate video about Temporal Flux and how that works if you were to do a build in terms of Temporal Flux. And so I'll insert that right here, or either put it in the description below. And I want to move on now to Legendaries, which I'm also going to make a specific video for each individual Legendaries, or each individual Legendary and certain synergies, but I wanted to go over them. If the mana saving Legendaries, which I'll be referring to, are Gravity Spiral. I'll show you here in the home. Go back to loot, and are the Gravity Spiral, Ronin's Assaulting Arm Wraps, and the Mystic Kilt of the Rune Master. I'm not counting the Court of Infinity until that thing gets buffed, because it's probably the worst Legendary that we have. Literally, like, actually worse than the neck, because of how many stats the neck gives. It's better than the Cord. So those are the 3 I'll be referring to. And keep in mind that the Shard of the Exodar and Cephas' Secret both are mana spending in the term that it gives you haste. And so you'll burn your mana quicker, and that'll almost sometimes, the Shard of the Exodar can almost cancel out some of the mana saving that these 3 do for you. But in terms of single target, the better Legendaries for single target is going to be Ronin's Assaulting Arm Wraps and the Kilt. Not that Gravity Spiral is not good, but Ronin is more particularly for single target, whereas the Kilt also does fine. And Trinket is also great, and the Shard of the Exodar is also great. Really, if you were to do just a single target and you had to pick between all of these, I would probably pick Ronin's Assaulting Arm Wraps, because it's giving arcane blasts all over the place. And other great Legendaries for it are Norganon's Foresight. Whereas if it's single target, it'll make you able to move while you're also arcane blasting frequently. And really, there's no perfect combo. The rest of them are really going to be fight dependent. How long the fight is for Shard of the Exodar, whether you're lusting on the beginning. If it's purely single target, how much movement there is, you might want this. If there's a lot of damage taken, you might want to run with the neck or the chest. And outside of that, there's no perfect combo for single target that's just going to do everything better than everything else. I guess you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. As far as rating for AoE, you're going to want the Kilt and the Trinket, most likely. And those 2 are just going to put out insane amounts of damage, especially Killjaden's Burning Wish. If you can line that up perfectly with overpowered arcane power, and then fit that inside of your arcane power and hit a big AoE pack on Scorpion or something like that, oh, it's going to be ridiculous. So those are probably the 2 you're going to want for higher AoE, and the same goes for Mythic Plus, with the exception that Gravity Spiral is also going to be amazing for Mythic Plus, as well as the Shard of the Exodar. All of them have pluses. It's not very likely that you have all 10 of these, so you'll be able to use some combo that's beneficial. And that's mostly what I wanted to go over. Just not forgetting that if you have an interrupt rotation, that Cephas' Secret is going to be great for you in encounters where you can interrupt, so don't count it out. As well as definitely not overlooking the neck. The amount of stats it gives, think about it this way. The Unstable Arcano Crystal is one of the best trinkets, especially if you can get it to proc the highest. It's probably the best trinket. And look at the stats on my 875 one with a socket. Now look at your 1200 stats, not to mention when you upgrade it to 940, it's going to give even more stats. And it gives you survivability for progression, and you have a socket as well. just spectacular stats on this, and so it's not a useless trinket. I think it literally sims better than Chord of Infinity, and so it is good. Don't completely discount it. Next, I want to move on to how the 2 and 4 set bonuses affect Nighthold. I kind of roughly went over that in the rotation. People tend to think that the 4 set is not that valuable, and while it may not sim as valuable as other classes, etc., you're going to want to have it, especially for long encounters. It specifically synergizes really well with Ronin's Assaulting Arm Wraps and the Gravity Spiral, as both of them work perfectly with how it works. So you generate more Arcane Missiles, and Missiles gets you more free Arcane Blasts with Ronin's, and when you're using Gravity Spiral, you can use your first Evocation charge and let that recharge while your Arcane Missiles are regenerating it, but you don't get the awkward lineup with Arcane Power or anything like that. And that's another thing that I wanted to go over. There's a misconception as far as the 4 set is that, it's not going to push it far enough to be able to beat your Arcane Power. But the point isn't to necessarily perfectly line it up with Arcane Power. The point is to just push it further, and so the longer the fight goes on, some fights like Gul'dan right now, heroic Gul'dan fights are going longer than 12 minutes. Like, it's going to be a ridiculously huge factor having your 4 set, because you'll be able to fit in extra, I don't know how many, because I haven't done it, and I don't have the 4 set yet, but I would assume 2 to 4 extra evocations in that fight, if not more. So it's going to be spectacular. And so don't discount that. The 2 set is mandatory by all means for rating. And as far as the 4 set in Mythic Plus, it'll also be great, because typically, even when you're AoEing in Mythic Plus, there is a priority target, maybe a target you want to get down that you're spending your Arcane Missiles on, and that will rotate through your evocations. Some Mythic Pluses are more than 30 minutes, and so that'll be huge as well there. Don't just think that because it's an item level upgrade, you can just drop your 4 set because people are talking about it not being great. It's spectacular, so definitely don't overlook it. Next, I'm going to go into the frequently asked questions portion of my guide. And one of the frequently asked questions that I get is stat weights, and I already went over that. Stop asking, learn what they mean, and stop asking. Just do better DPS. Do your rotation better and be a better raider. Don't worry about your stat weights so much. The second one is whether to sync your Arcane Power, your Mark of Alunith, and your Rune of Power, and your Presence of Mind. And I have resources in a written guide that I'm going to have a link to beneath it, where you can see the graphics that are set out, but there's really like a 2 or 3,000 DPS difference when it's simmed on a single target, not moving fight. So patchwork. And so there's really not an enormous difference when you're doing one target and you're not moving, and it's not a big deal. And so the proper answer is it doesn't really matter. A lot of people find it easier just to sync your Mark of Lunith, Rune of Power, Arcane Power, and Palm or Presence of Mind for just to sync them all together. They find that easier, and that's fine. The instances where it's really going to matter if you are super interested in min-maxing is how things line up in a fight. And so I'm trying to think of an example, but if you have a fight where every time you're dropping Arcane Power, it's in between ad phases, and it doesn't really line up well with your ad phases, so you're either having to hold your Arcane Power and everything for longer, you can desync them. And so if ads are coming out every minute from the pull, then you might just want to save your Arcane or your Mark of Alunith for that moment. And at that point, you might still hold on to your Presence of Mind, and because of that, you'll still have Presence of Mind during Arcane Power, which is great for the single target on the boss, but you'll have a little bit of cleave from your Mark of Alunith, and this also goes for Charged Up as well. And with charged up, people ask, do you want to use it on cooldown or save it for only in your burst? But that's a perfect example. You may want to save it for when ads are coming out so you can Arcane Barrage them and then charged up, throw in a couple Arcane Explosions and then Barrage at the end as well. So you can use that. Or you can Barrage, do an Arcane Explosion or two, Barrage again, and then build up charges on Arcane Explosion while they're dying to not have to build up with lower DPS Arcane Blasts. You can do all kinds of things, but it's really going to be fight dependent depending on which way you want to do it, or it's how it fits your preference if you're not that interested in min-maxing to every little DPS number. And so that's the answer as far as that goes. When we move to the next one, which is, do all kilt users need to use charged up? I would recommend that you do, because it's going to generate you more mana, which you can burn. If you have too much mana and you're not able to burn it quick enough, get more haste, which is another thing I advocate a lot for. Get more haste than you think you should have. But a lot of people also run Resonance because they like it, or they don't like charged up, or for whatever reason. But I highly recommend running charged up with the Mystic Kilt of the Rune Master, or whatever it's called. So I would highly recommend it, and that just means you can have less and less mastery and more haste, and get out more casts from more mana overall. A lot of people ask if Arcane Orb is viable, and while I would say yes and no, I think the perfect min-max answer is no, it's not viable. But where it does shine is in lower Mythic Pluses, when you're doing lots of big pulls and you shoot this through. You see it's critting for 500, hits for about 260k, and it helps manage mana as well. And when you're on a big pack, you can run in there with say we run in with 4 arcane charges, and you can barrage right off the bat for your priority target, and then you can charged up and then barrage again, and then you can Arcane Orb through all of them, and then spam Arcane Explosion again, and just keep that up. Maybe dump a couple Arcane Missile procs while you're moving to the next pack you want to kill, and then you can Arcane Barrage again, and then cast lower Arcane Blasts while the guy's dying, the last one's dying, then move to the next pack. And so it's really helpful, because if you notice, right as you engage, you're going to do quite a bit of damage with expending almost no mana, because you're going to barrage and then charged up, spend a couple, and then say we charged up right here, and so we spend 1, 2, 3, and then we barrage again, and then right at the end we're going to be able to use that. It generates arcane missiles for you, as well as 4 arcane charges through a big pack. And so that's saving a lot of mana. And so if you don't have a mana saving legendary, this will be really helpful. Or if you're running with the Time Warp Ring, this will be helpful as well. But where it starts to lack is when you're getting into higher Mythic Pluses and you just need to output more damage on smaller packs. Then that's where Overpowered is just going to completely outshine it. So I don't want to say perfectly viable, perfectly not viable. It could also change with all kinds of other things. Next is I've had someone that asked me to go over the Arcane Action Priority List, or the APL, for the Simulation Craft and just simming in general. And I'm not going to make an entire video right now about it, but a couple things I previously mentioned with as far as simming goes, where haste is very not valued, and one of the ways it's not valued, I'm not sure if this has been changed in the APL since the last time I checked, but last time I checked, what would happen is if you're building up charges and you have to move, it's not necessarily going to bank your Arcane Missile procs for when you have to move. So it's not accounting for movement like this. And so what it does is it just Arcane Barrages and then spams Arcane Explosion and Arcane Barrage until you're done moving, which is definitely not the ideal way to sim movement. And it's also not accounting for when you have to move, how having higher haste makes you able to fit in casts in between movement. So if you Okay, let's see. Charges here. So we have 4 charges. If you Arcane Blast and then you get a debuff, something maybe like on Il'gynoth, that you can cast and then it drops underneath your feet, move, cast, move, cast. It doesn't factor in any amount of haste and how it would be able to let you do that because it just constantly moves. And so because of that, haste is really devalued. And because of that, I just recommend getting more haste, not to mention also the fact that haste is better when you AoE, and it's more of a priority when you AoE, which there is a lot of in Mythic Plus and Nighthold. And because of that, I just recommend way higher haste. So the simming is, I feel, very inaccurate in that sense. Another thing is the action priority lists. A lot of times if you don't delve into that, you don't really actually know what it's doing. A couple weeks ago, I think it was, before we came out with the new changes that are happening tomorrow, which is, what's the date tomorrow? January 24th. The changes to our overpowered getting reduced to 60%. Before all of that, some people were showing sims where we were at 10% mana and it was dropping Rune of Power and your racials, or like berserking, and then it would evocate right after that. It would do a mini burn without an arcane power, which is super non-ideal. And so the sims aren't always the best thing. They're great for trinket analysis and stuff, but I guess what I'm trying to say is don't treat them as God, because they're not. They have flaws. They're not always the best, especially when a lot of changes come out. They're not always perfectly accurate because the action priority list hasn't necessarily been changed to perfectly fit that, or it doesn't get changed depending on every individual number change or tuning that Blizzard does with every talent. So just don't treat it as God once again. Another thing I get a lot of questions about are haste breakpoints. And I'm also leaving this as well in the description below, but I've gone through and done kind of a haste breakpoint like sheet, I guess, whatever you want to call it. And let me see if I can pull that up. Let me see. Didn't plan on using that this second, but I can pull it up real quick and change it over so you can see kind of what it looks like, and then you can determine whether you want to actually view it or not. So here's what we have. I just made how long your arcane power duration is, and these are the cast. This is your haste over here, and so depending on how much haste you have, it'll show the yellow on Arcane Blast is where you're going to get another Arcane Blast in. I made it kind of a wider range of yellow, depending on your latency and your lag, how high you need to get this. I'm not exactly sure, but this is where you're typically going to see breakpoints. And here's your Arcane Blast cast time and your Arcane Missiles cast time with that much haste. And this is the breakpoints for Arcane Missiles. And since we don't always just cast one or the other during Arcane Power, I've done a couple here where if I start Arcane Power with a lot of Arcane Missiles, I'll typically use about 2 Arcane Missiles within the cast. And because of that, I've shown this is the amount of Arcane Blast cast you're going to get in to the Arcane Power window, depending on, once again, how many relics you have. And using 2 Arcane Missile casts, and you can kind of check the breakpoints here. And you can also go down farther, as I've gone pretty far down. No one's going to have 60% haste, but Heroism, it does give you 30% more spell haste. So you can see if I'm running 25% haste, what will it look like at 55? So you can also you can also see what your breakpoints are going to be in time under the effects of Time Warp or Lust or whatever you call it. So I have this sheet that I'll link in the description below. And let's go back to the WoW screen. And let me see. There's another thing. I don't think I went over relics as well. Relics, in terms of what are going to be the best. The best one is going to be your Arcane Power extension. And I'm also going to Frosted's posts on Alter Time has a sim out that shows you when an item level, and we're not talking item level upgrade of your relic. So we're not talking 875 to 876. We're talking item level upgrade. So we're talking 906 to 907 when it talks about item levels in there. And so the three highest are going to be, the three best relics are going to be Arcane Power Extension, damage dealt by Arcane Blast, and I think it's Critical Strike Chance. No, it's Arcane Chance. Spells have a 3% increased chance to activate Arcane Missiles. Those are going to be your three best ones, and then followed by Crit Chance and damage from Arcane Missiles. And after that, you're essentially always going to use an item level upgrade. So if I have all of those. Oh, so right here, for example, increased damage dealt by Arcane Barrage by 13%. If I get any relic that's higher than that, any item level, so if it goes 880 and that bumps this up another item level, it's better. So all the other relic bonuses are going to be an item level upgrade over, doesn't matter what their rank is. And this could possibly change a tiny bit with Overpowered's reduction to 60%, but I don't really buy that that'll change. And if you have Ronin's Assaulting Arm Wraps, you're really going to want to prioritize this as well, because this will help exponentially throughout your conserve phase and make that better. And so that, I think that is all. I also wanted to add in a section for Nighthold tips and tricks, but I've been taking a slight break for real life stuff, so I haven't gone through with my guild and run all of normal and heroic multiple times to give you a thorough breakdown of that. So I'm going to insert a link to a video as well for that. And another big question everybody has is, should I actually be Arcane, or should I be running Fire or Frost to min-max for my guild? Because I'm on a Mythic guild and they want me to run the best thing and everyone keeps telling me to change this or that. The bottom line is just that Frost is going to be probably the best single and two-target cleave. As far as mages go, Fire is going to have the best overall cleave, and Arcane has probably the best burst and the best AoE. Or I guess Fire is probably a little better at AoE than Arcane, depending on situations. But we have a lot of burst AoE, which is great for raiding. Arcane is probably the most versatile, but it has probably the worst cleave. And it's not the best single target, and it's not necessarily the best AoE, but it's great at everything. And so it has a great toolkit without having to completely change all your talents or throw everything away. And I think it's a great choice as far as rating goes. And already I've beaten some Frost Mages on single target, so it's not really, there's not one spec that's going to be better all around for everything. Frost is going to struggle in raids on certain encounters because they're very AoE focused, and to do good AoE, they really have to change talents and sacrifice single target. And Fire is going to really struggle with just single target, but do better when there's AoE and cleave in encounters. And there are some encounters where it's just going to be the best fight for Frost Mages, or the best fight for Fire, or the best fight for Arcane. I just did, what was the dungeon? The boss I just did, it was Star Augur Atreus, and the fight time for that lined up ridiculously well for me as a, oh, I can't pull it up now, but it lined up ridiculously well for me to where I had my cooldowns right as hero came up. I was able to burn all my mana, bring my mana right back up with evocation, and then burn it right at the end of the fight. And because of that, it worked out really well for Arcane. It might have, and that's the fight I beat a Frost Mage on. His 3-minute cooldown might have had 20 seconds left on cooldown and not as lined up as well. And so, but when we get to the point where we're on farm and we're doing it faster, it might not line up as well for me, and it might end perfect for different classes. So there's really no perfect spec, and if there was a perfect spec, I would say it's Arcane. But I'm also an Arcane main. So, but it's probably got the best overall toolkit, and I think it's great for raiding and Mythic Plus. And I don't see a reason that if someone's telling you shouldn't be Arcane, I think they're misinformed. As far as that goes, that is all of the information I had to go over. If you'd like to see something added that I didn't go over, then you can comment below, and I will add that in the description below the video, and you can see that as well. But as far as that goes, if you guys enjoyed the video and you liked it, or it helps you out in any way, it would really help me out if you could like and subscribe. And I have lots of other Arcane resources and videos, and I do all kinds of Arcane stuff all day. So if you're interested, you can look me up on Twitch and get more gameplay that way, and that would really help me out, and I'd appreciate it. But thanks. We'll see you in the next video.